I'm Natalie Carolin. I'm the marketing manager at One Nucleus, and I'm joined with my colleague Mona Lisa, who looks after our training and development. And we're here today for our webinar with Sciad. We have Paula Burton and Taryn Wensley. And we're going to be covering why brand matters, defining your brand personality. So we suggest you can put your questions into the chat, and Sciad will then answer them towards the end of the talk. And otherwise, I can now hand over to them both.
Thanks, Natalie, and welcome everyone. Thank you for giving up your time this morning. We're going to be talking to you about building your biotech brand and bringing it to life online. So if we have a look at the things that we're going to cover as part of that, as Natalie said, we're going to talk about why brand matters. And when we talk about brand, we're referring to your visual and verbal identity, the way that you present yourself to the world. So we'll talk about what we mean by visual identity, a little bit about how brand evolution differs from brand revolution. And then I'm going to hand over to Taryn, who is our digital manager and our expert at all things digital, who'll talk about how to develop your brand online and which platforms you might consider choosing. And that will depend very much on the type of organization that you are. So if we move on to the next slide, by way of a quick introduction, I'm Paula, I'm project director at Sciad. And I've worked in marketing and communications roles across the life sciences and science more generally throughout my career. And Taryn?
Hi everyone, I'm Taryn. I'm the digital manager at Sciad. My background is in marketing with a specialty in digital marketing. And I really enjoy helping our clients work out a strategy that works best for them within their budget to give them the best results.
Thank you. So very briefly, a bit about Sciad. We've been around for 18 years. Deborah Cockrell is our founding partner. She started out in science publishing and advertising. And over those 18 years, we've supported the biotech and life sciences sector. We've expanded into the wider healthcare and engineering sectors over time. So you can see some stats there. We've worked with many biotech startups and more established companies, supporting them with branding and design. We've built many websites, and those platforms have changed and evolved over the years. Lots of digital marketing campaigns, and we also get involved with scientific conferences, helping organizations to run those or supporting them through press and media relations. And one thing's for sure, we do know just how important a consistent look and feel is. Whether you're going for Series A funding and pitching to investors, or whether you're a startup needing to present a confident, professional window to the world, it's always really important to put your best foot forward. So thinking about a brand identity, what questions do you need to ask yourself if you're thinking about embarking on this? Actually, firstly, it's a brand refresh is often driven by a new CEO, or perhaps there's been an internal review in your organization, or you've had some feedback from your employees. There are different drivers behind embarking on a brand identity review. And as an agency, when we're working with companies, we're always in listening mode when we're speaking with our clients. So our role is to understand where life science leaders want to take their brand. The first point to consider is what degree of change might you be looking for? This obviously applies to an established company rather than a new biotech startup. But do you want to go Twitter and pretty much tear up the rule book and start again? How do you want to be unique in your category? That is really important. And quite often, our starting point for a brand review is actually looking at all of the communications that are produced by an organization, looking at messaging and positioning and how they're seen in the marketplace. just to get that nugget of what it is that makes you unique and how you're going to portray that visually. Brand personality is important. We'll talk a little bit about that. And I already mentioned brand evolution or revolution, and I'll talk through an example of a client we've worked with for a few years where the brand has evolved over time. I think it's important to say that for new startups, the starting point is really about what are you doing now and where you want to be in not just 2, 3, or 4, but possibly 5 years' time. So if your brand is evolving, is going to evolve over time, you need to make sure you put something in place that's robust. Okay, so if we move on to the next slide, we're going to talk about why brand matters. Why is it important to have a clear visual identity? So when you're talking brand, you're building a strategy from the ground up. As I said, if we're working with businesses, we look at messaging and position in the marketplace. It's always really important also to look at where your business sits in relation to competitors. That's very important. And quite often people we talk to have got an idea as to who their competitors are, but we can really help nail that down and make that clear. So we use all the information we gather to frame a creative brief that we give to our designers so they can start thinking about an identity. And it's really important to have a set of guidelines for your brand. That's sort of a published rule book, so that when you have a visual identity, there are clear rules as to how to use it, how not to use it. That's something that's really important for internal teams to have, as well as suppliers that you may work with externally. Everything needs to be agreed. That goes without saying. You need to be able to position your brand, obviously visually, but also conceptually, so that people you're talking to over a period of time have got a clear idea as to what your organization is and what it is that you do. And obviously you need something you can take forward as you grow, because communicating with your stakeholders isn't something you can do in a haphazard way. As a business, you'll be creating lots of standalone communications targeted at prospective customers or investors, based on data and research. And then if we move on to so other points about why a clear visual identity is important. We talk about the 3 C's: clarity, coherency, and consistency. And that all contributes towards storytelling, the way in which you're going to tell the story about your organization. So it's not just about looking good. I always think when I sit in on pitches, if you go to Genesis and you're sitting in on companies pitching, the ones that really resonate are the ones that have got a story behind them. And I think that's a really important point to remember. Consistency is important because it builds trust. You want your audience to remember you for the right reasons. And so bringing all that together, you need visual elements, you need to understand your target audience, your market positioning, and get your messaging right on track, to develop a really confident and clear brand. And I put this slide up here because I just think this encapsulates what I've just said. Successful brands stand out from the competition. They build customer loyalty. They create a consistent, cohesive identity. And they have to have that roadmap. So you have a roadmap so that all your business decisions that go forward are presented in a clear and effective way, which is really the key to growth and success. So it's all about targeted reach. Something that's really important as well is making sure that every piece of communication that goes out from your organization is aligned with your brand values. Your tone of voice is right, and that it all comes together and aligns with your objectives. So if we move on to the next slide, this is brand essence, and we talk about 3 words that encapsulate the essence of an organization, and you can see 8 logos on the screen here. All of these organizations have 3 words that they've attributed to themselves that they believe are their brand essence. So top left, we've got Apple, arguably the most successful brand of our generation. X, the controversial rebrand from X, from the fun bird to a striking mark. Amazon with its aspiration to become one of the world's largest online retailers. I won't go on, but you can see there are some really solid brands there. And if you just take a minute quietly to think about a couple of those yourselves, have a think about what 3 words you think these organizations might attribute to themselves. What is it that they say about themselves that they believe makes them unique? And then I'll reveal the 3 words for each of these brands in a minute's time. Going to feel like a long minute. A good exercise to do is if you're part of a group. Potentially a good exercise to do with your own business, actually. Have a bit of fun in your next meeting, get people around the table and see what they have to say. Right, I'm going to do the big reveal. Here are the words. And do they correspond to the sort of the 3 words that you might have put down? So Apple, innovation and elegance. I think McDonald's is interesting, consistent quality and accessibility. X, empowering global conversations. I wonder if that's still the 3 words that X attributes to itself. Be interesting to know. But anyway, as I say, I think this just shows that it's quite an interesting exercise, and perhaps think about your own business. Are you developing drugs in a particular therapy area? Or what is it that you want your investors to say about you? Try and come up with 3 words for your business in the future. And it's something that you will need to refine over time, really connecting everything you do to your values. So let's move on to understanding your brand. And if we go to the next slide, as I said earlier, you need to understand where you are now if you're starting out on a brand review, and what degree of change do you feel is needed. And here it's really important to have insights from your current audience or customers, any insights from investors that you're talking to. How can you understand what it is that people are saying about you? That will be easier to do if you're a CRO and have access to a customer database and can do some research than perhaps for an early stage biotech startup. But it's just important to capture as much information as you can. And what you see on the slide here is a Wordle, and it's actually based on a client we worked with a couple of years ago. And they'd actually done an exercise with the entire organization and looked at their vision and values and mission. And when we started brand review with them, we spoke to people individually, and they'd all bought into the vision. So the big words that are highlighted here are those words that they feel they want their customers to attribute to them. And that gives us a really solid base when we're looking at messaging and positioning for an organization. I think it's really important not to underestimate the importance of corporate memory when you're doing this sort of thing. If there are employees who've been in your organization for quite some time, their view will count. They'll have seen a lot and experienced a lot. So you need to understand everyone's position in order to decide what story it is that you want to tell to the outside world. And obviously understanding where you sit in relation to your competitors as well. So let's look at the components of a visual identity. Basically, when we're thinking about how an organization looks and feels, there are 4 different components that we consider. Use of color, the typography used, the logo construct, and use of imagery. Those are the 4 key components. And I think when people talk about brand, they think about a logo or a mark. Absolutely, yes, that's part of it. But it's about much more than that. It's the visual and verbal language that portrays the essence of your brand personality and values. And it's the combination of the visual elements, the target audience, and your position in the marketplace. So you need to think about all of these things if you're going to come to a common understanding of your brand. And I'm just going to go through each of those components, the tools in your toolbox, because they're quite interesting. This is a very brief overview, but color is really important. You may know a bit about this, but there's a lot around the psychology of color. And obviously they play a really important role in brand recognition and perception. You can see, if we move on to the next slide, you can see lots of different logos in the middle there, and you can see a whole host by the oranges and yellows, and then a lot on the blue side. And it's true to say that in the sort of business, the corporate arena, there's a lot of use of blue and green, particularly in the life sciences sector. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Blue as a color conveys, the cool colors, calm, trust, security. All of those things are attributed to the color blue. But you can also use a host of secondary colors. So when we're creating a brand palette for companies, even if blue is the base, you can use complementary bright colors as secondary colors to really make your look and feel pop and stand out. And there are different hues that work together to create a cohesive and memorable brand color palette. The warmer colors, the oranges and yellows and reds, they tend to be used to convey energy and excitement. So that's the first thing we start to think about when we're talking to people. We're getting to understand them and where they might want to go with color. And then if we move on to the next slide, typography is really important. And when we talk about typography, we're talking about style, the weight and contrast of different letters, the spacing and alignment of letters, and the consistency and hierarchy. So there are examples on this slide that use very different styles. And one of the key things, if you look at Tiffany & Co. and the Times, they use a serifed font, which is a more traditional look and feel. If you look at Louis Vuitton, that's a sans serif font. That looks more modern, more slick. You can also look at Louis Vuitton and you can see the sort of the light nature of the font, which influences tone. Heavier weight fonts tend to feel strong and authoritative, whereas the Louis Vuitton with a lighter weight, that can feel elegant and refined. Spacing is important and alignment. Look at TED. That affects readability and mood. So something tightly spaced, as with the TED logo, can feel energetic. More generous spacing feels sophisticated and calm. And when I talked about consistency and hierarchy, I'm thinking more about, say, a page on a website. If you have a consistent look and feel and style for your headings and subheadings and body text, that's reinforced right across your site and across other communications. and just again gives that sense of consistency and reassurance. So let's move on to the third one, the brand elements. So you've got different logos here, very different in look and feel. You've got the Times with its traditional serifed font, all black. Sony's a long-standing brand, have looked like that for many years. Because of the spacing and the letters, it doesn't look as traditional as the Times. You've got IKEA with its bold, bright colours. Similarly with GSK, that rebranded relatively recently. And NVIDIA with its bright colours, modern sans serif typography, and all caps. And capital letters, something that's interesting to think about. Using capital letters is a very bold statement. When we talk to companies, we find a lot prefer to keep with lowercase. That might change over time, but they feel more comfortable with it. Feel it's more appropriate for them at that point in their development. And let's move on to the next slide, because I just popped, you might not be able to see these brilliantly clearly, but here's a selection of clients that we've worked with over the years. And if you look at the bottom row, we worked on a couple of these, chromatin and consinity genetics. And quite often an early stage sort of biotech startup will really want people to understand what the exciting, innovative science is that they're working on. So quite often they won't just want a typographic mark, they'll want something that has a bit of design built in as well, which is quite interesting. Let's move on to our final point, and that's about imagery and how it shapes brand identity. So photography is really important, builds an emotional connection. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see images that appear on the GSK and Charles River websites. There are different styles there. Some are a bit quirky, a bit fun, close up. And contrast that with the two images on the left, which are simply capturing elements of things going on in a lab. That doesn't really convey that same emotional connection as the other two. Let's move on. I'm a little mindful of time. I'm just going to touch on brand personality. And let's move on to this slide. Again, this is an exercise you could do internally, and it's something that we do when we're working with clients or running a workshop. We're looking at what you see on the slide here are examples of different design styles of car. We're not bothered about the brand of the car, but we ask people to look at the design aesthetic, because it can be a really helpful way to think about your organization. When you're thinking about lines, are they sharp or smooth, surfaces, proportions, form, signature details. We did this ourselves the other day when we were talking about Sciad as a science communications agency, and decided that we'd be a Mini Cooper, small, perfectly formed, agile, and always sort of trying to find solutions to help the people that we're working with. So quickly, brand evolution or revolution. You've got examples of companies on the left that have evolved over the years. We've also got, sorry, thank you, Sciad on the right. You can see where we came from and where we are now, as with GSK when they sold their consumer business. And at the bottom, Oxford Biomedica, one of our clients who relatively recently went from their full name just using the 3 letters with a mark. And that signals a sense of confidence to the marketplace that they feel that people out there know who they are. Let's move on. Finally, I said I'd talk you through an example of a brand evolution. We've worked with Lavrock Therapeutics, a preclinical biotech that are developing a gene silencing platform. We've worked with them for around 5 years. And if we move on to the next slide, Lavrock started out as Skylark. therapeutics, or were considering that as a name, realised that was already out in the marketplace, so switched to Laverock, the Scottish word for skylark. What you see in the middle is the first iteration of their look and feel. They wanted to keep with the traditional burgundy and blue that they had. And then last year decided to go for something much brighter and bolder. So we worked with them to refresh their brand and create a new website and supporting collateral. Now, if we just whiz through the next series, so that was the very traditional look and feel initially, with the serifed font, the skylark appearing in the logo. That was the early days of Laverock. If we move on, we looked at, when we were exploring what we might do, we looked at different logo mark options, ones that built in perhaps the one in the middle, an element of the bird's crest. And then you have the Laverock appearing on the right-hand side. So these are all the discussions that we're having with the team, as well as looking at typography, and moving on to colour. So we explored colour, and the team decided they really wanted to stick with a good solid blue, but have pops of pink and secondary colours to bring their brand to life. And if we move on to the next slide, there's a video that actually moves on this slide that makes the site really interesting. We've also got scroll-based animation, the use of bright colors, and then finally a bold palette so when you look at Laverock now, you do see a modern, fresh, bold organization that has grown in confidence over that 5-year period. And it'll be interesting to see where they go from here as they go for their Series A funding. So that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Taryn, who's going to talk to you about the digital side of things and how you'll apply that brand online.
Thanks, Paula. Right, so now that you've established what your brand should look and sound like, we need to decide where to showcase your brand. So why is it important to have a digital brand or digital presence? Having a digital presence allows for a 24/7 visibility of your brand, which helps to drive early stage visibility, build trust, drive engagement, and accelerate your brand's growth. So over the next few slides, I'll take you through a few important ways that you can build your online presence. There's lots of different ways, but these are some of the tried and tested methods that we know work really well. So obviously, having a website would be step number one in establishing your online presence, and this allows for instant credibility, helps to attract more customers, represents your brand 24 hours a day, and helps to improve brand awareness and build brand authority. But a website can only do these things if people can find it. So optimizing your website for SEO and more recently GEO, or generative engine optimization, ensures that your site is discoverable by traditional search engines and included and cited in AI-driven answers. So together, these will future-proof your website, helping to attract traffic from both traditional search engine results pages and generative AI platforms. Moving on to the next method, we have organic social media, which helps to build long-term relationships and brand loyalty by fostering genuine ongoing engagement. It's where your brand's voice and personality can truly shine. And then on the paid side, paid social ads deliver fast results with precise targeting, which helps you to reach the right audience at the right time. And together, these can create a balanced strategy that establishes an authentic connection with your audience from organic content and amplifying impact with your paid campaigns. So next up is search engine advertising, which will allow you to reach prospects at every stage of the customer journey by using the right mix of ad formats. So you can build brand awareness and spark interest with ad types such as display, performance max, and demand generation ads. And then you can capture high intent traffic with search ads when prospects are actively looking for solutions like yours. And this combination ensures that you're visible early on and when your audience is ready to convert. The last method we're just going to discuss is email and customer relationship management systems, or CRMs. And these days, first-party data is becoming more and more valuable and important. So regular emailers can help businesses stay visible online. You can nurture leads and remind existing customers of the value that you offer. A well-managed CRM system ensures that every message can be delivered at the right time and in a more personalized way, which creates a smoother, more engaging experience for the user. By using emailers and CRM systems, brands can strengthen their visibility, build trust, and help businesses stand out in an increasingly competitive digital landscape. So next, we're going to discuss some tips to get ahead and stay ahead when you're deploying your brand online. So if you're a service-based business, this slide is especially important for you because sales cycles can often be long and you need to plan ahead. It's important to recognize the length of your sales cycle so that you can start planning your pipeline for the future. Often we find clients come to us needing leads right now, but unfortunately they don't appear overnight and they require consistent work. So it's crucial to have a consistent brand presence in order to ensure a good lead or sales pipeline for the future. And the graph on the right here illustrates one of our clients' lead pipelines. So by consistently promoting their brand, they grew their pipeline over time. In times when they paused the ads for various reasons, that's when you see dramatic decreases in the number of leads generated. So you can see over time, by putting in the hard work, they grew their leads month on month and year on year. So I'm sure you must have heard of the rule of 7. The traditional rule of 7 suggests a prospect needs to interact with your brand at least 7 times before purchasing. But in today's crowded digital landscape, the number is often higher, frequently ranging from 7 to 20 plus touch points. So while 7 is the classic benchmark, the actual number depends heavily on product price, complexity, and your industry. So what is the 3-7-27 rule? This is a more modern approach, which reinforces the importance of repetition in building your brand awareness. And it suggests that on average, a potential customer needs to see or interact with your brand 3 times just to notice it, 7 times to start remembering you, and 27 times to build enough trust and familiarity to consider you a loyal option. So while the numbers can vary, the principle is universal, and consistency and frequency are key. So a one-off campaign is unlikely to build lasting brand value. You need to have a sustained presence across relevant touch points to move from being noticed to being trusted. And so staying with the theme of consistency, it's important to ensure that your brand is consistent across platforms, not only in terms of frequency, but in terms of your branding. You need to ensure that you offer a seamless brand experience, regardless of what platform a user might encounter your brand on. So in the pictures there, you can see the branding booklet, and then that translates across to your social media assets, and it closely reflects the user experience someone would have on the website as well. So imagine if every appearance of your brand looked, sounded, or felt different. Do you think those 27 times would build impression and recognition, or would it reset it? You need to be consistent enough to be remembered and intentional enough to be trusted. So how do we do this? You need to map your customer journey by identifying where your audience looks for their information. Use consistent branding so your logo, colors, and tone across all your channels to build recognition. And then provide value, not spam. So offering content of value such as a blog post, case study, or helpful email, instead of just salesy, aggressive pitches. And then lastly, leverage retargeting ads to reach users who've already visited your website, and that can help them to reach the trusted threshold. So while remaining consistent and growing your recognition and loyalty, don't forget to be selective, and this will help you to maintain quality and consistency. Invest your time and energy into platforms that you know are going to deliver the highest return on investment. These are the platforms that your audience actually uses. So choosing the right online platform for your brand requires aligning your business goals, resources, and target audience with specific strengths on each platforms. Rather than attempting to be everywhere, it's effective to select one or two platforms where your audience is most active and where you can maintain a high quality, consistent presence. So how do we go about choosing the best online platforms? So step number one, we'll start with defining the goals and brand. You need to identify what you want to achieve. So for example, if you were looking for brand awareness, you would choose platforms that have high traffic volumes on them. If you're looking for lead generation, platforms like LinkedIn, if you B2B, work really well. Step two would be identifying your target audience. So know where your potential customers spend their time. Professionals and B2B, maybe they're on LinkedIn. For more visual and lifestyle brands, the audiences may be on Pinterest or Instagram, for example. And then thirdly, evaluate platform strengths. So choose your platforms that match your content capabilities. If you can produce really good long form video, which are great for tutorials and in-depth content, then YouTube would be a really good option. For LinkedIn, if you can create professional B2B networking and industry style articles, then that's a good option for you. Step four would be to assess your resources and be realistic about your time and budget. You can't do everything. So if you have a small team, focus on one or two platforms to avoid overstretching, and then you have poor engagement. If you can't produce high quality videos, you wouldn't use TikTok or YouTube, for example. Focus more on image or text style platforms instead. And if you potentially have an advertising budget, then you might use platforms that run ads, like LinkedIn, for example, which offers really highly targeted options to boost your reach. And lastly, you want to take a look at your competitors and see what they're doing. See how they're actively reaching your audience as well. And then test and learn. So start with a pilot campaign, one or two platforms, collect your data using tools like analytics and platform insights, and then adjust your strategy based on performance. So ultimately what we're saying is the best approach is to go deep rather than wide and master one or two platforms. This will yield better results than having a weak presence on many platforms. Right, so how do we go about building our platform strategy? Firstly, we need to decide on what platforms to use. Remember to select the platforms where your audience is most active and in the right mindset. So Google's great for capturing existing demand and building awareness through ads and SEO, as it's the search engine with the largest global market share. Microsoft or Bing is a default browser for many PCs. It's often overlooked, but users can have a great buying power or greater buying power compared to Google. And then LinkedIn obviously is your professional networking platform, and users are browsing with a business mindset. And so it can be really useful. They often have twice the buying power of audiences elsewhere, so they're very valuable users. So that, coupled with your paid ads and your organic, can be a really powerful platform for B2B lead generation. Just breaking it down a little bit further, here we can see some examples of demographics for each platforms, and it's an important factor to consider when evaluating if your users are active on these channels. And then social media platforms, again, we can see the demographics such as ages can be different, quite different across the different platforms. So you need to do your research and see where your ideal user is browsing. And then, so what should we be posting and where? This is an example of how all the different tactics that we've discussed today pull together a cohesive strategy to move users from their journey of awareness to conversion. Each stage of the marketing funnel requires different platforms and content types in order to reach your goals. So, for example, if a user was at the top of funnel, they a more awareness stage, you could use tactics like educational SEO focused blog articles that solve common industry problems, or paid social or search ads which promote helpful resources. Moving to the middle of the funnel, then a consideration phase, and you could have webinars or events that have deep dives into industry problems. You could write comparison articles that detailed your business with competitors. And bottom of funnel, when they're in more of a conversion phase, you could show them your customer testimonials with detailed reviews highlighting your successes. Offer them a free trial, allowing users to experience your product or service, or a special offer or discount could be helpful as well. Often we find people are a little bit worried about running ads. They think they're very expensive. But if your competitors are running ads, even if you have your best organic efforts, you likely will only appear in their shadows. It's important to stay competitive, but we know budgets can sometimes be tight. So some of our clients spend millions of pounds a year, others spend £1,000 a month. But even the smallest budget can get results, and it helps to get the ball rolling. Once you prove that things work, then you might be able to access some additional funds. So every company's strategy and ad investment's different, and while there'll always be companies with bigger marketing budgets than yours, this doesn't mean that you still can't be successful. Having a smart strategy and choosing the right platforms is going to help you make the most out of any size budget. And then my next tip is don't forget to measure. When you've done all the hard work, if you don't monitor your efforts, you can't manage your success. So measuring will help to find what works so that you can scale, and equally as important, find out what doesn't work so that you can optimize and learn as quickly as possible. And then in 2026, digital marketing budgets are not disappearing, they're just being reallocated with intent. So as media costs rise and search and social and economic uncertainty continues to push marketers to defend your ROI, we must be even smarter with where we spend our budgets. So these are a few different ways in which people are spending their budgets in 2026. There is a really high focus on the omni-channel approach, so making sure you have multiple touch points across different platforms. And then search and social obviously remain really influential touch points in the digital path to purchase. and marketers are showing strong intent in increasing their Google Ads and Bing budgets in 2026. SEO and AI-powered search obviously remaining in the focus with lots of AI advancements coming along. And so marketers are increasing their budgets in order to help fight for visibility in those search engine results. And measurable outcomes is really important. So we have to report on our efforts and make sure that we're showing a return on investments. So making sure you have good measurement in place is really helpful. And then authentic engagement is the last one. And this is platforms like Reddit, for example. They're gaining some budget share because brands are seeking to have authentic communication and build communities with users. And so they're doing that through platforms like Reddit. So we know that's a lot of information, and hopefully that gives you some ideas and things to think about when building your online presence.
Thanks, Taryn. As Taryn said earlier, if we really hope that's been helpful, if you'd like to get in touch, we'd welcome a chat with you. To quote Taryn, we're not salesy, aggressive pitchers, but we are here to help. So hopefully you've learned a thing or two. I think the slides will be circulated. And thank you very much for your time. And please let us know if there are any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't see any questions. I don't know if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question or type it in the chat. 1 minute. No?
Yep.
Well, all right. Well, of course, you will get a follow-up from us with the slide link. And thank you very much indeed to Sciad, to Paula and Taryn for helping the marketing challenges. Very useful information indeed.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing it.
You're very welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.